And I was deeply, deeply, deeply disturbed. I was deeply disturbed. I never wavered and stood by him and continued to stand by him and express love. But little would I know that I myself would also experience the challenges of mental health firsthand. I had a major project I was working on, which would have been the biggest project of my entire company. So at that time, we had been, this was our 10th year, and this would have been the biggest signature. It would have completely transformed the fortunes of the business. And it was something that I felt so confident about. I had de-risked it significantly, and I felt very confident about it. And last minute, everything that had been baked and done correctly last minute, the anchor investor died. And suddenly, the project spiraled out of control, and it became a massive challenge, and it precipitated the greatest mental health crisis I had ever faced in my life, where I would later learn, because I was clinically diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And there were many days during that period where I would have feelings of hopelessness. I would not be able to enjoy the things that I used to enjoy, and I simply did not find joy in some of the basic things that previously I would find a lot of joy in. And I think what made it even worse was the fact that even though I have a loving family, amazing, and an amazing supportive network of friends, I couldn't tell anyone. So I bottled everything inside, and I simply did not have any outlet. And I didn't tell anyone about it because of a lot of these, what I call these very toxic masculinity, right? Our social and cultural mores that reinforce toxic masculinity. So this idea I had in my mind about, Charlie, I'm an African man. We don't get emotional and talk about these things. And those ideas of what it means to be a man, right? Which you see if you watch how we raise our children. You see a little girl will cry, you put it on her shoulder and you say, oh, it's okay, it's okay. Little Kweku is crying and you tell him, my friend, be a man. You blast him and tell him to stop crying. Those little things that we do end up shaping adversely our ideas of what it means to be a man. What is that performance of manhood and masculinity? And it's very dangerous. Because when you face situations where you need to be vulnerable, where you need to be open, you are unable to. Because in your mind, you think that is exhibiting weakness. And so one of the biggest challenges I faced was those ideas, that toxic masculinity, further isolating me and making me unable to reach out to and tap into my otherwise loving and supportive network. And so I suffered in silence until, through the help of a friend, I was finally able to wake up and say, look, I need to do something about it. And that's actually what inspired me to go out and give a TED Talk. And I went public with the challenges I was facing with mental health. And I decided that I was going to become an advocate. Because at that time, I realized, at that time where I faced this, I was doing the joint MBA and Doctor of Law at Harvard. I had just signed my book deal. I had been featured in Forbes for the, I think, second or third time. On the surface, it looked like I was super successful, even though inside I was suffering and struggling. And so I realized, I reckoned, and I said that I felt that I had a moral responsibility to speak up for those who could not speak up and to shed light on this important topic, because the stigma was so deep and so overwhelming that oftentimes, even with everything, even after I gave the TED Talk, it took me a very long time before I finally was able to go and see a psychologist. Right? And so it's something that I think is quite important. It's something that I think we all have a role to play in, right? Because if you actually look at the data in Ghana, the last data I looked at indicates that 6 million Ghanaians are currently suffering from anywhere from mild to severe depression. 6 million Ghanaians. 6 million. That means out of every 5 Ghanaians walking around, one of them, and this is just depression. Right? So there's a sense in which we need to recognize, and that's just in Ghana. Globally, 322 million people today are living with depression alone. Right? And in fact, the burden of mental health, when it's calculated, far exceeds that of many of our other diseases. And so I think it's important for us to recognize, and for anyone out there who's suffering, to know that you are not alone. You are not alone. And you also need to know that it is, especially for the men there who trap their feelings within themselves, it's important for people to know that being vulnerable does not make you weak. It makes you human. And in fact, being unable to express how you feel and being unable to express your challenges, if anything, far from making you weak, is actually denying you the full strength of your humanity. Right? And if you don't believe me, Scripture tells us. We see through Scripture that some of our great figures, David, go to Psalms 38:4, Job, in Job 3:26, Elijah, 1 Kings 19:4, and Jonah 4:3. If you dig deep into those parts of Scripture, you realize that they all struggled with mental health. They all were facing deep feelings of despair, anger, loneliness, depression. In the Psalms, David at one point when he was fleeing, asked for God's intervention, and he did not say, God, save me from Saul. He said, God, save me from my thoughts. So Scripture itself gives us so many examples of these great figures. King David himself, whom God loved so dearly, he himself struggled at times with mental health. So this is for us to know that it is a part of life. It is nothing to be ashamed of. It is nothing to run away from. It is something for us to embrace and to realize that we need to drop the stigma about it. We need to pay attention to it. We need to talk about it. We need to learn about it. And we need to be empowered to seize it by the bullhorns and to make sure that we can all play a role, okay, in fighting the stigma and in ensuring that we create the right environment for everybody to be able to live full, productive lives where they can experience joy. And this means that it requires a number of things. It requires that at an individual level, as the previous speaker, the doctor said, we need to take certain steps to focus on positivity. Within our families and our communities, we need to check on one another. Check on your loved ones. See how people are doing. Right? Check in on people. Create that supportive network for people. Create an environment where people will feel comfortable sharing their feelings. Do not, shy away from that. And especially do not create an environment where people don't even feel comfortable to be vulnerable. That's dangerous. Okay? And then it's also important that we start ensuring that we teach about mental health in our schools, in our churches, even among I love what the doctor said when he said that a lot of times mental health is manifested in physical health, and a lot of times you find that some of your physical health ailments will conversely also manifests itself in mental health. And so I think it's also important that we start to integrate, that we don't think of it in two silos. So that when you go to see your doctor for your annual checkup, he shouldn't just take your blood pressure and check your heart and do your blood test. You should also ask questions about your mental health, how you're feeling, how you're doing, so that we take a holistic approach to healthcare. Right? We need to better integrate healthcare. And that's what, at Africa Health Holdings, that's what we've been pushing. And then when we launched our telemedicine product, for example, one of the core things we integrated with our care offerings was to ensure that we provided mental health as well. But beyond that, it is a clear sign of mental illness. And what people who attempt suicide, what they need is support and help. They need to see a psychiatrist. They do not need to see a police officer. And so that's one place that I'm hoping, I appeal to Parliament, I appeal to the President, that we need to decriminalize attempted suicide. It is backwards, it is terrible, and it sends the wrong signal. The second thing that we also need to do that's very important, and I want to use this opportunity to call for it, is we need to increase funding for mental health. Across Africa, less than 1% of our mental health budgets, which already is a paltry sum, less than 1% of our healthcare budgets. So if you look at your Ministry of Health budgets, which already generally is a small amount, less than 1% of that goes to mental health. And for something that is such a massive disease burden, when you look at the disease burdens across the board, there was a study done with Yale that Professor Angela Ofori-Attah shared that the burden in Ghana alone, we lose about 7% of GDP. 7% of GDP. So it's no small matter. It's a massive economic matter as well. And so at all levels, at the individual level, at the community level, at the national policy level, there's homework for all of us to do. There's a role for all of us to play in ensuring that we can change the narrative. We can change the policies, and we can start creating the right environment where we all take our mental health very seriously. So that's my journey, that's my story, that's how I went from growing up with these ideas of thinking mental health and mental illness was an Obroni thing that African men don't experience, to seeing it firsthand, the stigma, through one of my best friends, and experiencing it myself, and understanding and knowing intimately the challenges, to becoming a passionate advocate and a fighter for the rights of all those who suffer in silence. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Sangru. I think for me, the biggest things that really stood out to me were just some of the things we don't consider, right? The fact that 1 in 5 Ghanaians, 1 in 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 in 5 Ghanaians suffers from just depression, right? And I remember the first time I heard of that report from Dr. Ofori-Attah, in that 7% of our GDP is lost due to the mental health wellness burden. And it just shows us the scale of the issue in Ghana and around the world. So once we come back from the break, we're going to take another amazing spoken word performance from DK. And then after that, we're going to be getting into a discussion on mental health in Ghana and around the world. Stay tuned.
CoRe, learning together, growing together.
I thought CDs were out of. Okay. Well.
CoRe, learning together, growing together.
I thought CDs were out of. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Popularly known as the godfather of Ghanaian spoken word, DK Oseyao is a spoken word artist and the director of the Spoken Word Academy of Ghana. He is an author of stories and poems who experiments with techniques that seamlessly blend the elements of character, setting, plot, action, resolution, and perspective in a narrative, dramatic, or emotional texture. We're really excited to have him. DK, before we go on to the spoken word that we're all waiting for, have you had any any mental health challenges that you'd like to share?
Absolutely. For an artist, it's I mean, I've actually had a very dramatic one being an artist, and the easiest way to that was through substance, abuse and stuff, It was at the time when I was thinking of a transition, transitioning from a performance artist into an institution, because I was thinking about impact, So it was at that time when, because I was thinking a lot of things. If I'm going to sort of retire, how was I going to make a living? And then also, I'm thinking of, touching more people than just standing on the stage. So it was at that point when it sort of like opened the door for the influx of a lot of, depressive thinking and among other things, And as artists, we always have some kind of, brush with, substances, all that,
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that story. Looking forward to hearing more of it. And so we're going to get right into the spoken word. Take us away, DK.
Thank you. The water broke free and spewed coolness into my supine face. I kept turning the knob on the shower for the release of more until it almost felt better than the rain. Yet I've always held rainfall to be a far more refreshing experience. It may not have poured down very heavily about just half an hour ago, but I bet that even the little that sprayed would uplift me on any day. Chlorinated aqua. The phrase sounded in my head, then I also heard, but it soothes all the same. These were all voices playing in my head with the incessant downpour of water onto my cranium. I have always cherished my moments under the shower. My chest continued to heave from the brisk running I'd done out there when it drizzled earlier. I now ceased to consider anything and focused my thinking instead with a little bit of exertion on the sound of my breathing. It had just begun quieting and slowing its pace to the tranquil of the pattering cold wash, whereas very softly the exhaustion within my saturated body drifted away, escaping through thin clouds of vapor as the running water repeatedly danced on my forehead and leaked downward to cleanse and cool off the rest of my human frame. At that instant, my eyes were completely shut and raised to heaven above. I felt extremely buoyant, like a spirit rocking in the middle of the Atlantic on a sunny Sunday morning. The pieces of thin broken sticks with charred tops that he flung over his shoulder had scattered all around the floor behind him. He guarded the flame from the last match with utmost care. His left hand was cupped around it like an opaque lampshade, while his bearded face gently drew closer with the wick to catch fire. Only millimeters away, the flame flickered and almost died out, but he had been more cautious and patient this time, not to have allowed the tiny puffs of air that escaped through his nostrils to put out his glow. The fire quickly kissed the paper wick that pointed out his mouth, and it blushed bright red. In 3 very lengthy draws in, he subjected the other end of the puffy paper wick to a heavy suction. That some of the minuscule husks of its contents stuck to the tip of his tongue. A brief moment of respite followed, lining the air in the room with thin trails of smoke that quietly rose from the burning tip of the paper wick. Then soon afterwards was a massive explosion, a gush of dopamine into a streaming red liquid that ran through pipes beneath his skin. The last of the elongated draws in on the paper wick had at this time accumulated with the previous 2 and caused this explosion. Like a smoke alarm, there was scarcely any delay in triggering the neurotic activity that unleashed the euphoria that suddenly made everything clearer to him. The birds singing hallelujah, the cocks crowing, Nyamia kokroko, the whine of mosquitoes closing in from the distance, crying about shortage of blood during daytime. Everything suddenly and lucidly made sense to him, even the sound of the cricket that promised no sleep. I was blind, but now I see, he remarked in awe of the shocking revelation to this newfound epiphany. What was also wondrous is how, in that enlightened state of mind, many questions came thronging in. Questions that had once crossed his mind, yet had not received any proper reflection due to the burdening apprehensions of everyday life. After waiting too long, most of these thoughts simply tarried the subconscious on the long waiting list of other thoughts, queuing in to be thought through. What were those thoughts saying to me the other day while I was passing? What really? He unexpectedly found himself asking inaudibly.
DK, thank you so much. DK, thank you so much for that amazing performance. Guys, you are streaming and you are tweeting. We're actually trending at number 7 in the whole of Ghana, so that's really exciting. So after this commercial break, we're going to come back with a panel with me, Sangu, and Dr. Newman Arthur. We're going to be discussing mental health. We're going to be getting into their presentations. Keep sending in your questions. We can't wait to discuss them.
Are you a young person dealing with the disruptions caused by COVID-19 to our careers, education, health, and social lives? Welcome to the CoRe program, an e-learning, e-mentoring, and e-counseling program designed to equip you with diverse skills to enable you to thrive now and even beyond this pandemic. We encourage you to download the video, audio, and workbook for each episode for free on the CoRe program website, www.core.com.gh. If you are an MTN user in in Ghana. You can download all videos, audios, or workbooks on our website without using your data. It's completely zero rated. And here's the bonus benefit. If you register on the website and go through a minimum of the 20 of the 24 sessions before the end of November, you will qualify for a certificate of completion from the CoRe program. We will be very excited to hear from you. Post your questions and comments on our social media pages at CoRe program, or send them to us on the CoRe WhatsApp hotline 0551 535 533. CoRe, learning together, growing together. CoRe, learning together, growing together.
I thought CDs were out of. Okay. Well.
Welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, this is the CoRe conference. We're talking exclusively about mental health today. I have Dr. Isaac Newman Arthur, who is a medical doctor and a clinical psychologist, and Sangu Dele, who is a mental health advocate. So we had a really interesting set of expositions. Sangu talked about his personal journey, and Dr. Newman Arthur gave us a really good idea and context on the field of mental health. So just going back to your exposition, Dr. Newman Arthur, you mentioned that there's been a global increase in abuse as a result of COVID-19. What are some of the other mental health challenges that are coming about or becoming more frequent as a result of the pandemic that many people may not know about?
So generally, there are three mental health issues that run through, every situation. There are three. Then the others will follow. Stress, anxiety, depression. These three things. Stress has to do with people's reorganization of their lives and all the issues that they have to battle with every time. Then anxiety has to do with the uncertainties about life and life-related issues themselves and what they should do and all that. And anybody who is not able to cope with their stresses and anxieties, they may go into depression. They may go into depression. Some may have a risk factor for depression, and some of these issues become a trigger. So someone may have some genetic disposition to depression, but life situation, environmental issues may serve as triggers. So in this season, some people may be more depressed than others, or their risk for depression may go up than others. That's why you don't have to treat everybody the same way, right? You need to be able to individualize people so that you can understand their unique situation and be able to help them. Then also frustration with everything else, anger, boredom. Then abuse, which is very significant. There are some studies, some part of the world, where abuse has more than doubled or tripled because people use, leaving the house as an escape from abusive relationships. So they may use their work, they may use social gatherings to be able to cope with that. In addition to that, every situation or stresses in this season may serve as triggers, even for abuse. And now you may have to live with the abuser in the same environment for a long time with all the issues coming up. So the pandemic and issues around the pandemic serve as a trigger and also limits people's coping strategies and abilities to be able to escape from a certain abusive relationship. Then access to healthcare also went down during the pandemic,
right?
Because people were scared to go out. And so maybe you were abused, you could have gone to the hospital straight away. But because of the pandemic, you may not be able to go seek help or make a certain kind of report. And even institutions, shut down. You may have some illegal, redresses, things about maybe you went to report, they are on a case and stuff, it has to be postponed, and so you are there. So all these things are major. But in any pandemic, you realize we focus on the pathogen, we focus on the physical aspect of the thing. Is it spreading? Who is dying? Who is not dying? And that kind of thing. Forgetting the actual experiences people go through and how they're able to survive. And we know that the physical aspect of the pandemic will end with the pandemic. Really. More than, the significant aspect of the physical things about the pandemic will end. Right. But the mental health impact will linger on for generations. Because if someone is dead and the experience around that death, or you lost a business, or you went into some depression or post-traumatic stress problems, and all those things, it won't end with a pandemic. It will linger on. So even if there was some intervention, that we need to really institute, it is mental health interventions.
Right, and I think it sounds like the pandemic has really doubled down, because it's like there are the obviously physical health implications, but it seems like the mental health implications are even stronger, because at the end of the day, you know, while the issues are going on, you don't even have redress, you don't have your coping mechanisms available to you anymore. But one of the things you said that really struck me was that it starts from stress, right? And we all say, oh, I'm stressed out, you know. It's something that is a part of our daily parlance, right?
Yeah.
We say it all the time. So I'd like to throw this one to you, Sangu. You mentioned the role of kind of work and a really bad incident at work in terms of a deal falling through, really triggering a bad mental health episode for you. How would you say that for you, going through that experience has helped you to cope with the stress of your daily job,
Right.
And its impacts on your mental health?
So, before I get to that, I want to comment quickly on something Doc said, which to me is very important, right? So Doc spoke about how you have this pandemic, and we look at it through the lens of just the physical health, and we fail to see the lens of mental health. I would extrapolate that and apply that across everything. You know, unemployment, one of the biggest stresses, if you look today, young people, one of the biggest stresses they face, speaking of stress, is finding jobs.
Yeah.
They can't find jobs. They graduate with a degree and they simply cannot find jobs. And we look at that, we have the data across Africa, we have 11.7 million young people that enter the labor force every year to only meet 3 million jobs.
Right.
But we've always looked at that only through an economic lens and a job creation lens. But there's a massive mental health burden. It means that, you know, when you run about 8.7 million people are just there, stressed, you know, with despair, with hopelessness. And that, I think, if you listen to what Doc said, we need to start applying, if we start applying that lens to a lot of our other issues, we'll start seeing and taking mental health very differently. Now, with the stress, you see, ultimately, Doc talked about how the stress will lead to anxiety and eventually it gets to depression. What happens is you need to have, our bodies are, as humans, we generally have very good resilient systems. We have inbuilt resiliency. Now, where it falls down is where the resiliency, if you think of it as almost, imagine you're on a multi-floor house. And your resiliency becomes the floor. So if your resiliency isn't strong enough, you will fall through. Then if it's not strong enough, you will keep falling through. So I think for me, what happened up to that, and oftentimes when you go through stuff is when you meet the psychologists like Doc, they'll unpack and you realize that, oh, there are other things behind, right? Certain issues that may be unresolved, right? Maybe some things from childhood, maybe certain feelings that you've not been able to process. But what ended up happening effectively was because I had never dealt with a major failure before, my resiliency system was not ready for that. It was like a shock to the system. And so I fell through the floor. Right. But after that experience, that's the beauty of the human body. After that experience, after speaking with psychologists, I say the 3 interventions I had was therapy, family, the outpouring of love and support from family, and faith. And that was why I referenced scripture. When you, that's why I get very annoyed when sometimes religion is used to isolate people facing mental, where you tell them, oh, just pray and it will go. It's not for lack of will. Right? That's not the problem. It's not like you just tell them, oh, get up and you can do it. No, that's not the problem. We are solving for the wrong problem. But the faith part for me, where it came in was, there was in my state, there was a way in which I think I relied on the self. And so when things went, it was at the depth of despair, being able to realize that, you know what, I am actually nothing. I, Sango, am nothing, but for the grace of God. And there's a liberation in that. Because, look, it's not for nothing that we have, a study came out of the Harvard School of Public Health that showed that people who were religious and had regular attendance at whether it's church, mosque, or whatever, actually had lower rates of depression. And part of what drives that is you have a community, right, that checks in on you. But then there's also There's a liberation. There's a song, I had a friend who joked that he said, these Christians, when things are not going well, then you just say, oh, God has it. But,
right.
On the one hand, you can critique that, but on the other hand, there's a liberation that comes out of it, where you're like, you know what? Father Lord has it.
And I think that's big. So for me, 3 things, right? Therapy, family, faith. Now that's a great individual way to consider or to help you cope with the difficulties of life, because life is complicated, right? And so many things will happen. But on an institutional level, right, what can we do to move the needle in the corporate world around mental health? Because, if I have a stomach ache, I can call my boss and say, boss, I'm really not doing well today. I have a stomach ache. I'll need to come in tomorrow or something like that. But if I'm having a really poor day mentally, it's hard to call my boss and say, boss, please, my mental health is suffering today. Can I come in tomorrow? Like the kind of look and the kind of reaction you will get in general is not very encouraging. So what can we do to move the needle on mental health in the workplace?
Yeah, the funny thing is that, in the work, when you're at work, right, you come with your own mental health issues to work. In addition to that, the work environment adds to your mental health issues. So a worker has 2 stresses coming, his or her own stresses and problems, then the work problems. So together they're crashing on the person. So depending on their coping strategies, then it affects their output.
Right.
So there's something now we call presenteeism. Not absenteeism. Absenteeism means that you are not there. Absenteeism that you didn't come to work. But presenteeism means that you are there, but you're not functional. Because you just cannot function. And so there are a lot of bosses who sack you when you're not functioning, rather than finding out why is he not functioning, and go beyond that and help the person. In the same way, if someone has malaria and doesn't come to work, the same way someone is depressed or stressed, won't come to work. But we see those things under mental health as a personal issue instead of a health issue.
Right.
So that they don't seek help. Because nobody walks into the hospital and says, doctor, I'm sad, or I feel depressed, or this, help me. We don't do that because we don't know. So what I usually advise is that every working environment would have to reevaluate all the systems put in place to help in the health issues of workers.
Yes.
So that we add mental health to it, we add social health to it, even spirituality. Spirituality is the 4th, physical, mental, social, and spiritual. We need to be able to really look at our health systems in work environment and decide to incorporate all kinds of measures, even emotional intelligence has become a major thing even in work environment. And so that aspect, every work environment would have to design their health system to be more holistic instead of more physical health driven. Then also policies around work related, there are all kinds of policies that protect your salaries, protect this and that. There should be some policy to protect your mental well-being at work. And when something happens to you mentally at work, there should be some kind of remuneration and all that. Now there's a debate about women who are pregnant and whether they should come to work, at what point do they go for leave and all that. Pregnancy has major psychosocial implications. During pregnancy, around pregnancy, after pregnancy, some nations have done well by extending maternity leave and all that. But it's not just maternity leave, but during pregnancy, it's not easy to carry that baby through 9 months. So even women at work have their added stresses when they come to work. So we need to, even as a nation, look beyond all the things we know. Progressive knowledge, abounds. And, when there's some progress in some knowledge, we should be able to modify our systems. Even in some of our laws, I learned is colonial laws, we still apply them today. Even suicidal, long time. Yeah. But we should be able to move on. We move on to many things. Phones, we have moved on. Those days we use,
the colonial people, they've evolved and changed their laws, but
we're still using it. So I think that things about health, even in the training of health professionals, you realize that the mental health issues and training around professionals is not as it's supposed to be. Yeah. So you finish medical school and not be really solid about mental health issues, but you be solid about everything, because the system of training of doctors proceeded from a certain environment where physical well-being sat on top. So all these things will really have to change. Otherwise, people are suffering unnecessarily. Some people come to see me in a consulting and say, So it's that simple, and I've been struggling all my life. You put them in a certain perspective to understand their own experiences, connect the dots here and there. That's all we don't read minds. We only help you connect the dots, and that's it. And we're able to connect the dots and find a way to. So why did I struggle a long time? There are some people who have been raped before, and because of that, they got involved in all kinds of sexual behaviors just because of that. Rape is a door to many things. Some people become overly sexual about many things, and it affects their later marriages and all that. Some people hate sex because of that experience. Yeah. So even rape, you need to relook at that and all the policies around it, and free medical screening for a rape victim. It has to be done. Yeah. Otherwise, we just
We, as an employer, we allow mental health. We see it as part of physical health, so you can take time off. The challenge, I think, for a lot of employers, if I'm being frank here, is that employers are worried that people want to dodge. If you tell me you have malaria, you can bring your malaria test, and I know that you had malaria. But I think a lot of employers are worried that, hey, if I open this door, every Tuesday and Thursday, this person will tell me that, I'm...
right, so for you, as an employer, but also as somebody who has gone through mental health challenges, how has your
1 minute, because of what you said, we can actually test.
Can test, yeah.
There are tests for mental health issues, depression, anxiety. We have all kinds of tests. So if someone is like, no. So the same way you go check malaria, you just go to hospital for some psychological assessment, maybe a counselor, a psychologist, or clinical, psychiatrist. We have tests too for mental health issues.
So what happens? what happens in the situation where, say, you don't have like clinical depression, but something really adverse has happened, something has shocked your system. So maybe it will not show up on a test, but genuinely you are struggling.
So there are what happens in that case? We do subjective assessments and objective assessments. Subjective is the interaction we take you through. There are all kinds of things we know. Your behaviors, everything during the interview we know. So you don't know what we are picking. I remember there was this pre-employment assessment for this guy, and right the moment he walked inside, all his gestures, mannerisms, we started chatting. All the things he was saying, he didn't know I was assessing him. So subjective assessment, you will know. If someone is lying, you will know.
So Doc, at the end, you are going to give us the results, because I know you've been assessing us.
So then we go to the objective assessments. Objective is where all the tests and stuff come in. To be able to say that, okay, to confirm whether it is there or not, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, and that kind of thing. So we know.
Okay. So now, you said that, 2/3 of all mental health illnesses have a physical manifestation, which is actually psychosocial.
No. So 2/3 of all illnesses, more than 2/3 of all illnesses, have major psychosocial implications. So all the diseases you can think about in this world, all of them have direct. For even malaria has mental health issues. Why are people not draining why are they not sleeping in the net? Why are their environment the way they are? How are they thinking about things? It's mental health.
So if that is the case, what can we do to kind of break down that silo, that wall between physical and mental health? Because a lot of the time, like Sango was saying, if 1% of our entire healthcare spend is on mental health, that means what? 99% is going exclusively to physical health interventions. But given how interlinked the two are, how can we begin to educate people to break down that wall and ensure that mental health is given a bigger role in the way we think about treatment?
Well, that's what we're doing. Like, we need to start from somewhere. Every discussion, everywhere. I think that sometime TV3 or so during this pandemic, I was with Dr. Betta on TV3 about COVID-19 issues every day. And some channels, I'm not sure other channels talked about mental health the way they should have. So I think that it should be a responsibility for every institution to increase mental health awareness. Even maybe quarterly in your work environment, you should be able to invite a mental health worker to come and talk about mental health issues. And it begins from there. The more people understand, the more they are able to, influence, healthcare practice and all that around it. Even our policymakers, the more they understand, the more they're able to. Now, I think, over the years, if you look at mental health progression over the years, people have done a lot of work. Passing all kinds of bills here and there in Parliament to be able to increase access and all that. If we continue what we are doing in this intensity, I'm sure that things are going to work because people have really worked. And currently, I think the Ghana Psychological Council and the Ghana Psychological Association and Psychiatry Council and all those councils, Mental Health Authority and all that, Dr. Alse and all that, they are really professors. They are really doing all kinds of things, you know. But we need to maintain that consistency. And organizations like yours, you know, we need to increase that.
So it sounds like, one, we need to continue the work that's already been done. We need to increase the consistency. But that is on an institutional level, right? So on a social level, one of the things that Sangu said that really struck me was, you know, when the first time you hear mental health, especially when you're young in Ghana, the first thing you think is, oh, Abodamu, like, he's crazy, or she, like, you know, it's always at the extreme where there's no kind of in between, there's no understanding that, you know, mental health is a spectrum. There's so many intervening points in between, let's say, neurotypical behavior and what people would consider as behavior that is a symptom of mental disorder. So within that spectrum, right, how do we kind of how do we eliminate or reduce that stigma for people? Because I feel like that's one of the biggest things that you really said that stood out. How do we reduce that stigma?
I think a lot of it is back to what Doc said, is the conversations, right? Is making sure that, because the stigma happens when we hide the elephant, right? And so bring the elephant in the room, and suddenly it'll disappear. So we need to have these conversations in schools. We need to have these conversations in our churches. We need to have these conversations in our workplace. And then it'll become everyday conversation. And we need to also have some leadership about it. Like when we talk about taking time off. Can you imagine if our president said, guys, you know what, I'm having a rough day today. Right? No, today I stress. I'm just, look, I'm going to Peduasi Lodge for some 2 days. Just, like those, if we can have some of our leaders come out and elevate the discourse like that, suddenly people will be like, shit. Because you can only imagine the sort of stress at that level. And so I think the more we can mainstream these conversations, the better we can create a situation where every single person can feel comfortable talking about and expressing their mental health.
So far we've been talking about mental health and we've been breaking it down. Once we come back from the break, we're going to be taking your questions on mental health. So keep sending them in. And, you know, we all face challenges. They might be short-term, they might be long-term, but how we respond to those challenges will either affect us negatively or positively. So on next week's e-learning, Alex Williams, who is a person with a disability, he is blind, wasn't born blind but has become blind. He's talking about all the barriers that he had to sort through in his profession as a teacher. And so we're going to join him as he helps us to understand the ways we can make the best of every situation in next week's e-learning, which is on turning challenges into opportunities. So tune in to a radio or a TV station near you to enjoy this episode. That will be airing this week. You can also check out our website at core.com.gh to listen to this week's episode and check out any other resources that you would like to engage in, as well as if you're an MTN subscriber, it's completely free. It's 0 rated for you. And the bonus, if you complete 20 out of 26 episodes, you'll get a certificate of completion from the Springboard Roadshow Foundation. CoRe, learning together, growing together. We'll be right back.
CoRe, learning together, growing together.
I thought CDs were out of. Okay.
Right. So we're going to be going to your questions on mental health, and specifically for our viewers on Zoom, if you want to be patched in right to the studio with your voice, just use the raise hand function and we'll get right to your question. So the first question we have so far is, we are trending even higher. Okay. Now we're up to number 4 on the trending list on Twitter, so that's really exciting. And we'll get right to the question. So we have Samuel Tetefio who wants to know, what is the thin line between anxiety and depression?
So the two of them, there's no thin line. The two of them are different. So anxiety has to do with all fear-related issues, about yourself, the world around you, and the future. So any fear around that. That's how simple I can make it. Okay. Then anybody who is not able to manage their anxieties or stresses, they will go into some form of depression. So there's no thin line. The two of them are completely different. Just that one generally leads to the other, and the other may also lead to the other. Because the more depressed you are, and that affects how you think or feel about things around you, you may become more anxious or not. Yeah. And so the triplets, anxiety, stress, anxiety, depression, the three of them always, almost all the time, move together. Yeah.
Or I have a question for Doc on that, because I think maybe that's what he's getting at. Yeah. In general, you wake up every day and you're like, Charlie, today I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious today. When does it cross from that to, okay, you are clinically depressed, or you are clinically anxious?
Yeah, so sadness and feeling down is not depression. It's a symptom of depression. So depression, you may have a certain, group of symptoms which should last for more than 2 weeks and significantly impairs your functioning. Then you can say you're depressed. So you're sad, you lose energy, you lose interest, you hopelessness, worthlessness, you lose concentration, feeding, sleep, it becomes difficult. You have some suicidal thoughts and all that, and significantly it impairs your functioning over a period of more than 2 weeks. We all feel, depressed, sometimes, but it may not impair your function or anything, and it may not last for more than 2 weeks. Some may even last for 2 weeks, but it may still not, fall into. So that's how simple I can make it.
Right. So a couple of shout outs. We have Elvis Atusechi on the line. We have Jamefe El Supremo Keksi from Valley View University. So keep on sending in your questions, keep on sending in your comments. We'll read them out on the show. We have Ofori Amanfo Emmanuel joining from Accra, and Nana Kwame in Kansa Asante, who says, CoRe program, great mental health insights so far. Thank you so much. So somebody also wants to know, and this is from Ofori Amanfo Emmanuel. He wants to know, his friend has epilepsy, right? And so he's wondering what his friend can do to mitigate the mental health effects of having that illness and have a more peaceful life.
Well, the person should start developing a certain healthy mindset about it. Epilepsy is just like hypertension. It's a disease. It's an illness. The two of them are different. I have a problem with religion and, even Ghanaian and how we do our stuff. It's in the movies and all that. Anybody who commits a crime or does something bad or goes to maybe a traditional help or whatever, medical whatever, the effect is, epilepsy or some seizure of a sort, or madness.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
People associate these things with some kind of supernatural causes or some kind of sin, or you've done this or there's a case here. And so that affects the person who is going through that, their mindset about it. And because of that, they don't seek help. Anybody who has some seizure problems, if they go to the hospital, take their drugs consistently, and they listen to all the advice around it, they should be functional. Yeah. Like anybody else, and be able to go about their normal activities. So it starts from there. Know that you have an illness which is not supernatural or spiritual. It's no fault of yours. You've not committed any crime. Your family is not under any case. It's just brain activity that is firing all over. It is not your fault. And with that mindset, now you say, so if someone has hypertension, it's a disease, I have epilepsy, it's two different illnesses. Yeah. So I can live a normal life, function like everybody else, without feeling the fact that I'm carrying some curse around me, or there's some demon somewhere trying to change my destiny. Right. That kind of thing. Because when you assign spiritual causes to things you don't understand, then you have an opportunity to stigmatize it or not seek the right help.
And make them mysterious, right?
Yes, and make it a kind of mysterious. And people, when someone is having a seizure or something, people don't even want to go close. They think they will be, infected or something. Like the spirit will transfer to you. There's all kind of perception about it. And I don't blame. It's purely ignorance.
So you have a bit of fan mail from Audrey McCaffrey-Sedo, who says, that's my mentor, Dr. Isaac Newman. So you're getting fast over here. And so we have another question. What advice would you, and I'll throw this to both of you, what advice would you give to 3 pieces of advice for a young person who is going through mental health challenges to build their resilience? What 3 things would you advise them to do?
So for me, it's the 3 that I followed, right? which is I'm a big fan. I'm a very big fan of people talking to psychologists.
Okay.
Right. I think that even if you haven't been clinically diagnosed, I find that in general it's a great way for you to build life skills, to better understand yourself, to better understand your emotions, and I'm a big fan of that. Right. In the same way that I tell people you shouldn't wait till you are sick to go and see a doctor.
Yeah.
You should do an annual checkup. Right, go check. In the same way, you should also go and check in. You shouldn't wait till you have a breakdown before you go and call doc.
Exactly.
Go and just do so an annual. The same way you do your physical checkup, also do your annual mental checkup. The second for me is family, and family loosely, not just the blood family, but also the family you've adopted. And by that I mean that I think it's really important to share your stresses. Do not suffer in silence. Do not suffer alone. Share what you're going through with your family, and you realize that your family, your friends, your loved ones, the burden immediately dissipates.
Yeah.
Because you get great support from them, and you're able to share it. So that supportive network also helps you. It's really important. And then the third for me has been faith, right? Which is really knowing that you are really truly not alone. And being able to, so not the part of faith that Doc was talking about where you are seeing witches and wizards in everything, but more just realizing that you are not alone. David went through it, Jonah went through it, Elijah went through it, right? We have an illustrious list that you can join, and having that faith.
And Elijah was not cursed, but
he was not, exactly.
And don't forget that if you are on the Zoom, you can raise your hand to ask your question directly. We're going to go back to the studio. And Doc, so what are your 3 pieces of advice for any young people who want to build their resilience with regards to their mental health?
So they should have a holistic approach to everything, because life is complex and it's not that simple. So physical, mental, social, and spiritual. And it's even in the Bible. The Bible is extensive. When you read Luke chapter 2, verse 52, it says, and Jesus increased in wisdom, in stature, favor with God, and favor with men.
Yeah.
Wisdom is mental. Stature is physical. Favor with God is spiritual. Favor with men is social. It's simple. And and when people misinterpret the Bible, it means they don't really understand. Because we need to be holistic in our approach. Even when it comes to mental health issues, be holistic. Because no one has the ultimate or the absolute solution to everything. When you mix everything, the results are better. So I don't discourage people who are going to pray, but come to the hospital. When you combine the two, the results are better. And now, thankfully, all kinds of religious folks are now coming up. I receive all kinds of calls that, Charlie, doctor, this one, add your own. I think we need that collaboration. We need that, because the human being goes beyond physical. There are other experiences of people that you cannot deny, but you need to find out how we can rub in. So be holistic in your approach. The second is that when you are struggling, seek help. Seeking help doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise, because we all go through stuff. I have my issues. How do I deal with it? It's difficult. The fact that you're a psychologist doesn't mean that you're free from all these things. I've gone on isolation 3 times in this season. Not because I had COVID-19, but I was exposed. At the beginning, I was one of the first people who were exposed at the beginning. Wow. You have no idea what I went through. The experience was those who go on isolation or something. It's not easy. People are afraid to come. I remember I was in somewhere, Charlie. They will come and put the food at the gate and press the horn. that Charlie, your food is so calm. And I just pick the food and look at myself. I say, Charlie, me pa mini. You know,
must have felt like you're in prison.
No, I felt. You know, at the beginning it was crazy. You know, when we didn't understand. So seek help. You know, if you realize that you're struggling with, you know, some kind of mentality, just seek help. Then the third thing I would say is that people should always look beyond the crisis. You know, and don't define yourself by the crisis. So you are not epilepsy. You have it. You are not, you know, bipolar. You know, you are not depression. Yeah. You see, people define themselves by their diagnosis. And because of that, they lose a certain strength to be able to move on. The moment you define yourself by your diagnosis, you fail to look at everything else that you are not. And that becomes very difficult for you to move on. Yeah. If someone has hypertension, we don't call him hypertension. In the same way, you can't limit yourself and think that life has ended because you have depression or bipolar or you have something. Because life goes, and we're all extensive. That's why in the hospital, I hate the lab coat, not because it's not important. But you see, the moment you wear those things consistently, it makes you feel that your life is just a lab coat.
Yeah, you are a doctor.
But you can sing, you can draw. I do carpentry. I love carpentry. Right?
That was one of my favorite parts of your bio. When I saw the carpentry, I was like, that's random, but I like it.
When I see wood, I get triggered actually. So when I'll be looking at the all that, and I started having ideas about it. You have no idea. Right. I started looking at the lectin and looking at the ideas because we are more than our diagnosis. We are more than our experiences. We are more than this pandemic.
Absolutely.
Life will go on after this part. So you always have to see yourself bigger than your suffering so that you can be able to harness your potentials. The extra, a lot of people are struggling with work at this season. But God is allowing you to go through the season so that you can discover other things about you and develop other areas of your life, which the pandemic has now exposed.
Right. So just to sum what I heard up. So Sangu talked about 3 things, right? Number 1, mental checkup every year. Don't wait till the car breaks down to go to the mechanic. You have to service the car. So just like you service your car, service yourself. Every year, mental checkup. 2, family, or as I would think about it, community, right? Voice out, so it's okay. Don't suffer in silence. Sharing the burden helps to ease the load. And the last one, faith. Just knowing that a higher power has you in their hands and is working with you is very reassuring. Now, Dr. Newman Arthur also gave us history. So he said, number 1, take a holistic approach. Just like Jesus, you want the physical, you want the mental, the emotional, and the social. So you don't want to be focusing overly on any one of them at any point in time, but just making sure that all of them are in balance and just checking yourself against each of these metrics at every point in time. Number 2, seek help. So again, going back to what Sangu said, just making sure that you're able to either see a professional, reach out to other people when you're going through any mental health challenges. And number 3 is making sure that you look beyond whatever the crisis is and not defining yourself by it. And I think the community with disability gives us a very good model for this, right? They don't call themselves disabled, they call themselves people with disabilities, and it's a good reminder to us, right? So you're not depression. You're not depressed. You are a person.
Though my good friend Farida Bedwe would argue that we all have disabilities, but she knows her own. You are yes.
Right. And so we have a question from Emmanuel, and Emmanuel's looking for resources. Emmanuel says, hello, can I be connected with anyone to help me with my anxiety problem? So what resources would you recommend for him, Doctor?
Now the government has made it such that every hospital you walk into, you find someone who is a mental health professional. Though we are few, but if you walk into any hospital, walk into any clinic, and see that you have anxiety issues or this and that, and you need to see a mental health professional, they are likely to have someone there who can attend to you. If they don't, they will refer you. And that's how easy it is. Yeah. So just walk into any health facility, anywhere.
Okay.
And that is how easy it is.
If they just go to My Care Mobile, we also have mental health over telemedicine being offered.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Emmanuel, you have some resources that you can get started on today, and I'm wishing you the best in your mental health journey. Now, We have a couple more comments from Giselle on Twitter. She says, wow, CoRe conference. And Barbed Wire says, a very informative conference. So let's all remember that if you're on Zoom, you can just use the raise hand function and we'll patch you in right to the studio. So one of the interesting things that we discussed, and this was something that I heard from Dr. Oforiatta earlier, but 7% of our GDP is lost every year. So both of you, if you were the president for a day, or if you were the president, right, if you had the power to change the way mental health is administered in Ghana, what is the one intervention that you would focus on to have the greatest impact?
I think that, so if we look at COVID, for example, right, and how we tackled COVID, COVID for us was not just a public health issue. It was very much an economic issue as well, where we could see it live. You can't go out, right? Suddenly, you saw the immediate impact on businesses. I think similarly, but in a way that we are not paying attention to, is the same effect. So that 7% comes from the fact that people are not able to be productive, right? People are missing days at work, and when they're at work, there's the presenteeism that Doc spoke about. And so the biggest, it's the biggest issue, because we know what to do about it. Unlike COVID, where there was a point in which we're like, we don't have a vaccine, we don't know what to do, there was some uncertainty. Here, we actually know what to do, right? We have, but what we really need, the two things that I think we really need, the biggest issue for me is awareness. And that's why I think that there almost needs to be a national campaign. I remember when I was a kid, there was a time when boys were being sent to school, girls were not being sent to school. And we had the national, send your girl child to school. We all knew the songs, like it became a thing. Right? And suddenly everywhere you go.
Song. That was a great song. I'm not even going to lie, that was a great song.
You know? But it worked. Now suddenly when you look at the data, we no longer have that same sort of gender disparity. And so I think similarly, we need to have this national campaign, right? That has to have leadership from the very top. That brings all the stakeholders, the Peace Council, the religious leaders, everybody has to be on board. And we need to say this is a campaign, we're going to go, we're going to make sure awareness is the number one. The second thing is we need to increase funding, right? We need to make sure, yes, it's a good step that we have, we now have a mental health professional in most places, but we still have a problem with access. So Accra is a bit easier. If you are from my hometown in Nandom, there's nowhere to go. Right? If you are in Bunkrugu, there's nowhere to go. Right? And so I think we also need to really start looking at access. And technology affords us huge opportunities now. Right? So you may not necessarily need to, yes, we have a shortage of psychiatrists. We know that already. We have a shortage of psychologists. But maybe Doc can be in Accra and we can set him up with Zoom. And he can Zoom with my cousins in London. So exactly. We can leverage technology. And then the last thing I will do immediately is I'll send a bill to Parliament and I'll decriminalize attempted suicide. In fact, I think I've said that every opportunity I get to come on any platform, I'm going to appeal and insist and call on the president to do that. And I hope, in fact, I even wanted to enter the political debate. And they should start outdoing each other on promises on what they will do for mental health.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope that happens. So,
so he said a lot. So one thing I would add, which I think is also critical, has to do with the training of more professionals, and incentivize them in such a way that they would be happy doing their work. Because I think, if you put in total the mental health professionals in the country, I'm sure it will be less than 1,000. You know, and we have to attend to about 30 million people. I'm not sure the figures, but we should be less than 1,000 or so. And so psychiatrists in the country, I think they are less than 100 or so. And that's really serious. So I think that we should be able to train more mental health professionals and be able to push them. Obviously, also with their conditions of service and all that. I think that is very critical. Because the more you train them, the more they're able to spread the message. Because it's not just sending any message out. You need the right people to send the message out. You know, and so the training becomes very, very critical. I think there should be more trained mental health professionals than even normal health professionals. Then I think still on this has to do with the fact that everywhere you go in the country, every corner you turn, you may have a private clinic there. That does something with physical health.
Exactly.
But psychology and other mental health, few. So we should be able to set up a lot of these clinics and give some incentives to individual mental health professionals who want to set up private practice. Because we need that all over the country.
And the screening, there was an interesting thing on the Dean's Board at Harvard Medical School. And we had a presentation on mental health by Dr. Vikram Patel.
Okay.
And he developed for the WHO a screening tool that primary care physicians
Can use. Yeah.
So that somebody comes for malaria or diabetes or whatever it is, you immediately screen them and then you can refer to your mental health professional colleague. So I think that will also be good if we can, because a lot more people will access primary health. So if we can make them the lookouts where they do the screening, they see something and they can elevate it. That will also help us.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that is low lift but high impact, because like you said, that is a primary channel for most people. When they're seeking any sort of healthcare, they would go to what they would consider the conventional hospital first. So if you can start referring people from that point, you have a very useful and recurring system of referrals. And Sangu said something really interesting, right? But whether you are in Nandom or Bunkurugu Yoyo, CoRe has amazing mental health resources for you, just for you. You can join our free group counseling sessions 4 times weekly via the CoRe hotline at 055-153-5533 or our website core.com.gh. Check out any of those platforms and they will help you get connected to our group counseling sessions via Zoom. So thank you so much for your submissions, President Dele. Yeah, so thank you so much for those. Now, this is another thing that kind of stood out to me as we were discussing, as we were thinking about how mental health breaks down in Ghana. Toxic masculinity, it's a big deal. Every day, you know. So, if both of you had sons, how would you raise them differently to ensure that, you know, they're able to express themselves in a healthy way emotionally and kind of overcome some of the adverse mental health outcomes that boys specifically tend to experience as a result of not being able to express themselves emotionally?
I was having this discussion with Professor Angie last night.
Okay.
And I was telling her 2 things to me that are very problematic. The first is, and I think I mentioned it a bit even in my earlier talk, from when they are kids, you see that the little girl is crying, everyone is like, oh, everything is okay, you know, you allow her to cry. Small Kweku is crying, suddenly you are blasting him. Men don't cry.
Kweku is suffering.
Okay, right, that's where the problem starts. Because we start to create an idea of what it means to be a man that's very dangerous. Right? And being vulnerable is human. All humans, we should be vulnerable. Suddenly we make it where it's like only women can be vulnerable. Men cannot be vulnerable. So you start bottling it in. And that's actually why when you look at the data shows that more women, if you just look at the data, more women report depression. I don't believe that data. And the reason I don't is I think that a lot of the men cannot even feel comfortable to say, I'm feeling this way and I'm feeling that way.
Absolutely.
But then we also see from the data that we have a huge spike in substance abuse from men versus women. And part of it is because we've created that sort of toxic masculinity wall and the men don't have any outlet, they don't feel comfortable. They go to alcohol and they go to other substances as the outlet. So it's very, very dangerous. So I think it's important to start with children and to create an environment where they feel comfortable. They feel if they want to cry, let them cry. Let them be able to express their emotions. That's very important. I remember even the second thing I told Professor Andrew was heartbreak. When a woman is heartbroken, she can go to her friends. They'll have a social gathering. They'll cry. They'll insult you. The man who has broken her heart. It's true. They'll spend the whole day insulting you, and then they are there for her, supporting her. If you're a man and they've broken your heart, who can you call? Your friends will laugh at you.
Even rape. You can't go report rape.
Report it. So you'll be sitting down in your house, drinking your drink, just crying to yourself. So we also need to change some of those attitudes. If your friend, they've broken his heart, maybe you laugh small. But after hold him and be there for him, we need to start changing those attitudes.
Yeah. So,
I
Dr.
think
Niwanata,
for
what would you
sons,
change on that?
there are two things I would also add that hug them often, right? Hug them often, and for prolonged, minutes, it helps. Hugs, helps. There's a chemical that is released when you're hugged, right? It's called oxytocin. It's the pleasure hormone. So hug them often, because hugging reaffirms, their own feelings, and it helps them, do well. So hug them often and take a walk with them. Trying to establish a certain conversation with them. Parents do not talk to their sons often. They do that, they tend to sit with their daughters more than their sons. So teach them about life, teach them about being vulnerable, like you talked about. Teach them how to express them, because the more they learn how to express themselves from childhood, the more they learn how to talk to someone from childhood, the more they are likely to talk to someone as they grow older.
Yeah.
So if you're a father or a mother, take your son on walks, teach him about life, how to treat women well, how to be responsible, not just that, but be able to talk to them also about how they feel about issues. When you establish that, they're able to carry it on as they grow older.
Oxytocin. That's
Oxytocin.
my new thing now. Everyone,
Oxytocin
I'll
is
say,
a pleasure
I need an oxytocin. Please give me a hug.
It's not the pleasure hormone. The feel you feel, when you're hugged is because of that.
Yeah.
And even sex has its own benefits here and there: dopamine, oxytocin, and also endorphins. It helps with pain, sleep, and all that. All these three chemicals, they are so important.
Right. So I'm hearing from the fathers and future fathers in the house that we must hug our kids. We must talk to them, take them on walks, teach them the importance of being able to voice out, to be able to speak their emotions. And I think what I will add to is that don't judge your kids' emotions. I feel like a lot of times, as soon as a kid expresses an emotion, it's like, hey, why are you talking back? So it's like creating an environment where children are confident enough and comfortable enough to share emotions. And we have a couple more
I forgot
comments
to add this,
from.
We shouldn't compare kids. It's one of the things we do, especially if your son is not performing well in school. You don't compare them, because men focus on performance. So the moment you reduce them to their performance, it affects them.
Yeah. So those are really important submissions, especially for the way we treat our boys. And today we're also going to be launching the CoRe Conference Wow Challenge. So Ghana's biggest youth conference, the CoRe Conference, is giving you an opportunity to win big. Join the challenge by sending us a video sharing your favorite experience by far on the CoRe Conference, or a precious nugget that has really impacted you. And that's it. That's all. And you could be the lucky winner of some amazing prizes. So the winners will be announced on our grand finale of the CoRe Conference in November. So get started now. And don't forget that submissions will close on the 24th of November. So we're going to go back to the audience questions. We have a couple more questions and some comments as well. We have James Nikwe, who says, great discussion, thumbs up. We have Elvis, who says, a lot has been learned. And as for Vardy, he says, Adusia dear, yeah. So the last question we have from the live page is talking about bipolar disorder. Is it curable? And that's coming from Martha from Koforijo.
So I describe bipolar, very simply. At one point you're on top of the world. At another point, the world is on top of you. So there's swinging between the two, right? So bipolar is a chronic, lifelong, but the impacts and the episodes can be reduced depending on the kind of help you receive, and also reducing the risk, or the triggers. So there are all kinds of triggers for bipolar. We talk about life situations here, the stresses and anxieties and all those things, they are triggers. So if the person receives the kind of help that they need, all the medications that they are given, and also they receive some psychotherapy, help them, cope with their stresses and all the triggers here and there. Yeah. You realize that the frequency in terms of the episodes will reduce significantly, but generally it's a chronic, form of mental illness with episodes, and those episodes frequency can be reduced depending on the kind of help they receive. If they're able to reduce all their triggers and receive the right help, they should do well.
Okay.
And I don't think it's a very big issue, though it's a big issue, but if people are able to, it's the mindset and, understanding your own
But
situation.
it's treatable. It's lifelong.
It's
manageable.
But
Yes,
it's manageable.
Yes.
Right. So we have on the line Joseph Bentum on the Zoom call. So Joseph, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm talking from Takrady. I'm from Takrady, Shama. And my question is, I heard we should stick to our mentors every day. And I'm saying after the mentor have mentoring us, and for us to know that we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do that. And now I can see now I'm professional by myself through my mentor. So why is it still need to get closer to my mentor? Maybe where I'll get to him, or him or her is far from me and those stuff. For me, I don't understand always how should go to my mentor whilst he have prepared me to face the world, or he have prepared me for everything. So now, I would say I'm a professional by myself. So if you can help me out with that.
So from what I'm understanding, you're looking at how come, even though you are professionally qualified by yourself, you still need to kind of go back to your mentor and reconnect with them. What's the point in that? And I'll throw that to the panelists.
Life, you don't end, mentoring, or you don't become a professional such that you don't need anybody around to be able to chip in here and there. Mentoring is a lifelong thing. Until you die, you need someone to encourage you, or maybe he doesn't understand what mentoring is. But mentoring, you need someone, shoulders to lie on, to rise to the next level, seek advice here and there, guidance here and there, and it's lifelong. I'm not sure any of us have. Yeah. Even Moses at 80 needed an advice from Jetson.
Yeah. And learning is lifelong. Learning is lifelong. Also. I remember there was a doctor who had a case that he called my father for second opinion. And the old man is now 77, has been doing this for 50 years. So in dermatology, everyone knows he's kind of at the top of his field. But I was so surprised last week when he also then called Professor Adi. From Adi? Yes, he called Professor Adi to also check in. I said, even the mentor also has a mentor.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so I think at every stage, there's always so much to learn. Yeah. So you always want to connect and learn from people, and learning never ends.
And I think the CoRe program, one of the goals is to let also people understand that we all don't have everything else. And in any time of crisis, you may need people to be able to chip in some lessons here and there.
So now, as we come to the end of the program, I'd like each of you to just give me your closing remarks, and just closing remarks from each of you. And one thing I would like you to do is, once you're done with your closing remarks, if you could add just a quick summary in one of the local languages, that would be awesome.
Okay, so I start. Okay. So I would say that mental health is extensive, and all of us at some point may need our thinking, feelings, or behavior may affect us. And anytime you realize you're struggling, you just need some help. And it's not wrong to seek help. And you always have to be holistic. A combination therapy is better than sticking to one. And so that is my final statement, that mental health is real, it's very extensive, and we need some holistic approach. Nti na ye ka sisia ne say the way I was doing for now, feeling for now, say won kita wodin say affect you. It means that who was some mental health issue, you need some kind of help. And so Oceana say adia wo ye no untumi enkoso wa brabomu affecti bibia e wa braboma. Just co hospital. There are professionals, there are psychologists, counselors, or psychiatrists who will be able to help you deal with the kind of issues you're facing.
Awesome. So
this one is Fanti, friend.
It's combination. It works.
So the only thing I'll add is to those suffering in silence, I want to encourage them for them to know that you are not alone. There are, at least for depression alone, there are 6 million Ghanaians and 320 million plus people globally. You are not alone. and you should speak out about your conditions, reach out to your loved ones, let them know what's going on so that you can share the burden. It should not and it will never define you. You are bigger than whatever your diagnosis is. And being vulnerable makes us human, right? And so all of this, I want to encourage you to reach out to your loved ones and to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I've been through it. I know what you're going through, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. So take this encouragement, and I hope you will seek help and you will thrive. God bless you.
Awesome. So thank you all for joining us as we, broke down mental health, as we explored the different aspects of it, particularly in light of COVID-19. We looked at the fact that COVID-19 has been explored or has been focused on in a physical sense, but there are so many psychosocial implications, and we broke down the various aspects and coping mechanisms for mental health disorders, particularly family, faith, and seeking help. So don't forget those as you go throughout the day. When we come back from the break, we're going to be taking one last spoken word performance from DK. Don't touch that dial. I'll see you shortly.
Are you a young person dealing with the disruptions caused by COVID-19 to our careers, education, health, and social lives? Welcome to the CoRe program, an e-learning, e-mentoring, and e-counseling program designed to equip you with diverse skills to enable you to thrive now and even beyond this pandemic. We encourage you to download the video, audio, and workbook for each episode for free on the CoRe program website, www.core.com.gh. If you are an MTN user in Ghana, you can download all videos, audios, or workbooks on our website without using your data. It's completely zero rated. And here's the bonus benefit: if you register on the website and go through a minimum of the 20 of the 24 sessions before the end of November, you will qualify for a certificate of completion from the CoRe program. We will be very excited to hear from you. Post your questions and comments on our social media pages at CoRe program, or send them to us on the CoRe WhatsApp hotline 0551 535 533. CoRe, learning together, growing together.
If you're out there, no matter how you feel or think or what circumstance you're going through, I would like you to know that you are extraordinary. And this be the reason you are extraordinary. Extraordinary is the spirit that's within you, and the spirit that's within you is who you are. A man is not a constituent of material possessions. You can pay for the lessons but can buy the class. Ask if the worst condition is to be blind. Nope. The worst condition is to have eyes but never have a vision, to function in dimensions. Peace like a river in the bottom of your heart. You need understanding to draw it. Just like the earth, all its precious minerals are buried deep under. You gotta dig for oil, you gotta dig for gold, you gotta dig for diamonds, or you gather sand and stones. Oh my, why does every young girl wanna throw away her virginity, or every young man wanna give himself to wine? That's the reason the pistol is shaped 7, and why it's not as perfect as 7 is yet a reason. Register. That's the reason the pistol is shaped 7, and why it's not as perfect as 7 is yet a reason. I love you. Thank you.
Back to the basics. I brought one up, but down so many times you don't want to even get up and just face it. You've been doing your best, trying to test every nest to find the best one you can lay in. That's why the CoRe project is here to help you gain skills to help you succeed and build your own nest. Springboard you to success. Nana, you go break through. Charlie, even COVID can defeat you. Search inside your core and you see you got the MasterCard of life in you. And it's so true, it is past due. So don't let nobody deceive you. I brought one here doing crack. I say any that's so up. So this is what you should do. Charlie, still move.
Make us work on menu. Make us work on menu. Make us work on menu. Make us work.